Thanks for joining. This webinar will tell you more about this super user role. My name is André Walland. I'm representing Offshore Norge here, and today maybe you can see my background. It's EqHub. So I'm coming from an EqHub standpoint, but this is really about several services in the Collaborate portfolio. So what's the agenda for today? First, I'm going to take you through the intro, some practical information about the webinar itself. I'm going to touch upon the history of authentication in Collaborate. Then we will show you a step-by-step guide on really what this user management flow is all about at the current stage. The last section is the Q&A. And this webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded right now, and it will be uploaded and made available. So those of you or colleagues of you who couldn't join, or others, they will have access to the same webinar and the same information on YouTube, which we will also send out in an information email to all registrants and all participants. Very important also, because there's quite a lot of people here in the meeting. If you have questions, please ask questions. You do this by, if you look down on your right side on your screen, you have a tab called Questions. You have also a tab called Chat, but please, for questions, use the question feature. Then you tick Ask a question, you type it in, and you submit by sending the question. Then you will probably see, if there is a lot or any, you will see all the questions asked on the right side. And if you find one of those questions asked interesting, you don't have to, but you can upvote, and others can upvote too. That means that the question with the most upvotes will be higher on the list, so that when we come to the Q&A session, I will stop presenting and we will go into just looking at the questions together. We will start on the top typically. And all questions, if there's more questions than we have time to answer today, and also if there are questions that are a bit more complex to answer, all questions asked we will strive to answer everything, okay? But it won't necessarily be in this webinar. We will send out correspondence after. We know who you are, and you will get some information and feedback once the webinar is concluded. So first, introduction. Why are we having this webinar right now? I can start with that. We made a transition to Entra ID, Microsoft Azure, previously known as Microsoft Azure, this January, end of Jan. Previously, since 2017, a lot of our services have been under authentication by a service called Hello, or Collaborate Hello, which has meant that any user who wants access to one of the services under this scheme would have to typically have one or more super users, the blue here, and one or more so-called Hello admins. So at the most, for material management, the number has been around 5,000 people. You could have had the same person doing both roles, but there's a lot of moving parts there. On top, support has always been available to assist, right, and are still able to assist. But from 5,000-ish users, depending on the number of companies registered in the solution, to now down to about 3,000 companies super users, with or without the need for support. So we've stripped away the orange in the middle here, and now have a more lean and efficient process for logging in and managing users. So what is the super user? I can say that all the participants in this webinar, there could be others also, but the idea here when we sent out the invitation was to target the so-called super users. So if you had that role on your person in your applications, you would be invited for this webinar, because we want to make sure that all of you understand what this role really is and why it exists. If we start by looking at the service terms for EqHub as an example, company super users is specified as a person with extended rights and duties within the application, service as it's called here. And for details, they're referring to section 8 of the same terms. Now here on the right side, it just says that the user organization shall have at least one company super user responsible for the administration and access provisioning for internal company users. Typically also the company super users is the main contact point, unless otherwise specified, when it comes to changes or requests from the service to the different organizations in regards to those applications. So that's why it's been there, and it's been there for, in some services it might be called an org admin, but it's the same thing. It's the company super user role, which has been a part of the way we run our applications for years, since 2017 at least. So now I'm going to show you just step by step, again assuming that you guys are super users. If you're not, you should still be able to follow. So typically what happens, right, is that if a user in your organization wants access, they will request it somehow, depending on the type of organization and your setup internally and in terms of IT and otherwise. A request is made orally, in writing, or through a self-service system, right? So at the end of the request, there is a super user that needs to get that request somehow. That user will go and add that user to the specific application, if he agrees, right? If this is something they want to do. They go into the application and they create the new user. Then the user should be able to log in. Some authentication is now made against Entra ID, Microsoft Entra, and he should be able to log in. Then the same company super user or a different one in the organization can choose to remove the user from that application. It's the same step. Find the user, click delete, and remove. And then the user should not be able to log in. So visualized from the application side, an email is sent, the admin goes to, or the company super user goes to his admin page within the application, clicks add user, specifies the user email, names, and so on, and the organization it belongs to. For you guys, you would have access to your own organization, pre-filled. You also have to define a role. What type of privileges does this user have? Is it a normal viewer? Is it something else? You add and save, and then the user can go and log in. And doing this also will send an invitation to the user automatically. It doesn't have to follow, but the user can at this point, once it's been created, log into the system. So by selecting the login button on the application homepage, you will be taken here, specify the account, probably do some MFA on your Authenticator app, depending on what type of integration you have here. That's the most common for most of us. We use the multi-factor authentication, and then you are taken to the application side, successfully being able to log in. For removing users, it's the same approach. The company super user can at any given time choose to delete or remove users within organization. You cannot remove his or himself or herself. You can remove others. So if an admin is terminated, you take that via support. So with this, also indicating now that this is significantly improved user management flow as opposed to just a few months ago. There's still needs among our user organizations. It's different type of organizations in general. Some have hundreds, some have thousands, some have tens, some have a few users. There's a need for some to be able to administer users much more autonomously, and also without having to do manually one by one. And we are working together with several of these organizations and together with our service provider to accommodate these needs. So it's not a statically deployed thing. You will probably have experienced since the transition also certain things or issues or whatnot, and these are all being worked with and fixed as we go. Bigger topics are typically more intensive and require more planning. So there's an ongoing dialogue now with stakeholders such as yourselves and internal resources in offshore Norway. This is not really related to the company aspect, company super user aspect, but please, if you haven't already, follow us and keep up to date with what's happening on the solution side, also in terms of Entra ID. Find your pages and follow us on the different channels that we are on, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the landing pages themselves. Subscribe to our newsletters and so on, and you will be kept much more informed than otherwise. So we've now come to the Q&A. I will stop sharing now and I will go to our questions. In the log here, if you go to the questions tab, you will see that there's one question asked from my colleague. This is an example of a frequently asked question that we've had over the last few weeks. Actually, a much longer time than that. I will try now to answer in writing so that we can keep track of this as I talk. Automatic provisioning and deprovisioning is something we are looking into solving now together with a couple of different companies. I don't have an exact date for this, but on the service side, we're trying to get this as soon as possible, as with most things we want to do. But this is really high on the agenda. Exact dates we don't have as for now, but the intent is to get this as soon as as soon as possible. Øyvind Høines from Equinor is asking, we were informed for a new release this Friday, bug fixing. Has there been a release today? Yes, there was a release. Now Øyvind is talking about Entra ID, and there was a release last evening. I can get back to you on the details related to that one, Øyvind. There's also a couple of new items on the list, but yes, there was a bug fix deployed yesterday. Any other questions? I can see that there's someone writing in the chat also. Thomas is writing something nice. Good to see. If there aren't any further questions now, we will wrap up. It was even much shorter than 30 minutes. But it's Friday, you have stuff to do. This webinar will be made available. And if you have any questions following this, tied to this topic, please reach out to me or the support team, and we will get in touch with you as soon as possible. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.